I begin, of course, with what I assume to be a familiar face by now. This is, of course, the face of Malala Yousafzai, the 15-year-old Pakistani teen activist who was shot in the head last year for advocating girls' education in Pakistan. She fortunately survived and went on to speak at the UN Youth Assembly in July 12, 2013, at which from which actually I excerpt the following words. Let us wage a global struggle against illiteracy, poverty and terrorism, and let us pick up our books and pens. They are our most powerful weapons. Education is the only solution, education first. Now, I think what I'm using Malala's words in order to underscore the faith in education that not only she has emphasized, but also various other international bodies. Education is always mentioned, be it the discourse on poverty alleviation or gender equity, starting with CEDAW, the MDGs, the UN World Development Report. Education, especially women's, girls' education is emphasized over and over again. So we need to ask why this emphasis on education, especially when it comes to promoting gender equality and equity. Now, as of course many women activists as well as others, UN bodies have pointed out, beyond the empowerment of women themselves, there are what I call returns or benefits to society too from the education of women. Now, because empirical data have highlighted the drop in total fertility rate, the decrease in child morbidity and mortality rates, and reduction in child malnutrition, among other benefits, which are of course to society, not just to the women themselves, from the education of girls and women. And that is of course one of the reasons that all these bodies emphasize education for women. Now, talking about education and women's status, Sri Lanka versus the rest of South Asia, I don't know how much you know about Sri Lanka as opposed to the rest of South Asia, but Sri Lanka is one of the best examples of how education can enhance women's status and positively contribute to the what is called the Human Development Index in UN and other social science circles, because though Sri Lanka in many ways shares many of the economic and cultural features with the other countries of South Asia, Sri Lanka has actually displayed off-curve characteristics in comparison with other South Asian countries with regard to many human development indicators like literacy, maternal mortality, life expectancy, total fertility rate, assistance by skilled birth attendants, even of course the adoption of contraceptives. So all of these, of course, have been attributed particularly to the high gains in women's literacy in Sri Lanka. Now, in fact, this is, I think, made clear because I started with Malala to quote the World Bank report for 1993, where Sri Lanka is actually compared with Pakistan, where we are told that Sri Lanka's 1921 literacy figure of 21% was identical to that of Pakistan for 1990. So you see the contrast. So as a result, actually, until the 1990s, Sri Lanka was something of a UN poster child as a low-income country, with a lot of other countries, but displaying high human development index, or indicators which were comparable with the so-called wealthy or developed countries. Now, what of course made this possible, I think, is the issue. And as I've mentioned, of course, in my abstract, the takeoff point, I think, undoubtedly can be called the free education measure that was proposed in 1943 and adopted by the legislature of colonial Ceylon in 1946. Now, the proposal, which was adopted in 1946, made education available free of charge to all Sri Lankans, irrespective of gender, caste, class, whatever, from primary through university education. And to this day, in Sri Lanka, including university education, it is free. What actually the present paper is doing is to look at the following two aspects. One, of course, is what factors enable the measure to become the socially transformative measure it has become today, something of the history and why it was introduced and all that. And on the other, to a kind of a more analytical or critical aspect, has it delivered in terms of the enhancement in women's status and indicators of women's empowerment, for example, in things like women's participation in wage employment, political participation, there is electoral participation, reduction in violence against women, right? So women have now gained everything in terms of education or literacy, but of course the status of women in society has it also advanced because there is so much faith in education and gender equity or equality. That is why I'm asking, how much has it delivered? So the paper seeks to ask, in other words, what are the strengths as well as the drawbacks to an education-oriented approach to women's empowerment and autonomy. Now, a comparison between pre-1946 and post-1946 literacy rates. To begin with, before 1946, only 44% of Lankan women were educated. I mean, we are talking basic literacy here. In comparison with 70% for men, right? But by 2010, the gap between male and female literacy rates have narrowed considerably, with 91% of women overall educated in comparison with 94% for men. So it's just 3% compared to the nearly double rates. Something even more remarkable becomes evident when we look at literacy rates for the 15 to 24 age cohort or age group, where the rates are actually reversed in favor of women. Now it's 99% of women are educated as opposed to 97% of men in the 15 to 24 age cohort. So obviously there's a change. Now this will actually become clear if you look at the figure for literacy rates by gender between 1881 to 1946. You can see consistently, you will see that there is the female literacy rates are almost half or less than half that of men until 1946, when of course this measure came to be adopted and introduced. So this universal free education measure that was introduced in 1946, we have to ask, why was universal free education so revolutionary in its impact on women, right? Now there were both economic and cultural factors for this. Now one of course most important of course was the cost, because the British colonial government which was ruling Sri Lanka till 1948 was not all that interested in education for the so-called natives, of course because of costs. They didn't see it as cost beneficial to invest. So as a result, education actually rested in the hands of the missionaries, Christian missionaries, whose main interest of course in education of course was proselytizing and conversion, right? So, and also partly as a result of that, they introduced what was called the two-tier education system, where there was an English medium, good quality English medium education which was available to the local elite, children of the local elite, but for a fee. Whereas there was free education in the mother tongue or the vernacular languages, but it was only elementary education. So both English medium education, which of course was a ladder to social and economic mobility, as well as secondary and higher education was for a fee. And so as long as it was for a fee, obviously parents those who can afford it have to make a choice between whom to educate, males or females, and clearly I would say it would go for the men. So, as a result, English medium education and secondary education was expensive, which then of course would lead to gender-based discrimination in access to education. Now, there were also cultural factors. Now, the colonial administration, with I think at very little basis, decided that all Eastern cultures would not be interested in educating women. There's this Orientalist kind of homogenized kind of assumption that Eastern cultures would not want their daughters, their girls educated, and therefore they did not actually encourage education for women in Sri Lanka or Ceylon. And of course parents were reluctant to send girls to school because of fear of proselytizing and also other kinds of intercaste mixing. There were many reasons, of course, in addition to economics. Now here I have again a comparison of access by gender to mother tongue, which is Sinhala and Tamil, and then of course English language literacy in 1946. Again, you can see, of course, the gap between men and women even in mother tongue literacy remains. But if you look at English, literacy, English language literacy, you will see again, of course, the access of both men and women to English language literacy is low anyway. But again, the English language literacy for women is clearly much lower than that for men. So, why was there no gender-based obstacle to education when it was offered free? Of course, so in 1946, when it was offered free, why did this exponential increase in female literacy take place? Is the question. Now, several scholars, since there is a lot of emphasis on Buddhism at this conference, several scholars in Sri Lanka have actually cited Buddhism as the reason for this lack of opposition to women's education in Ceylon, especially when it was available free. Now, I'm quoting two scholars here who have actually drawn attention to the role of the majority religion Buddhism in introducing a more relaxed climate for women in Sri Lanka in comparison with the rest of South Asia. So that though the immediate beneficiaries of this might have been Buddhist women, of course, availability of education sponsored by the state, free of charge, meant women of other religious groups also, of course, to different degrees benefited, like the trickle down or the ripple effect, which you want to call it. So a breakdown of female literacy rate actually along religious lines actually confirms this, because excepting for, what, I think I did something wrong. Wrong. Turn it back on. No, I think here I turned it off or something. Oh, right. Okay. Right. So you can see literacy rates by religion and gender in the year 1946. You can see, of course, Christianity scores the highest. But after Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, you can see the difference. Of course, there are special reasons why women and men of the Christian group benefited, because it was a colonial religion and there was a particular group that belonged. But other than that, you can see that Buddhism is scoring the highest. This is in 1946 literacy rates. Now, so the positive fallouts from free education today. What are the positive fallouts? Now you see again that today the overall ratio of girls to boys in school is equal to 50% if you take the overall rate. But if you take a further decomposition of the numbers at primary and secondary education levels, it shows that the number of girls in schools exponentially increases as students go up in grades. So that at senior secondary grades, girls outnumber boys at 62% to 38%. Okay, so 62 girls to 38 in the senior secondary education. What is even more remarkable is the gender breakdown in the admission to state universities, where according to the statistics for the University Grants Commission, the percentage of women at the public universities was 58%. So 42 to 58, at the state universities. And of course, since university admission presents a major bottleneck in access to higher education in Sri Lanka, what we actually see is what I call a major feminization of higher education, which you can actually see in this graph. For 1947, you can see that the number of women in universities is much, much lower than that of men. And then when you come to 1981 and then 2011, you can see that the numbers are reversed in favor of women. And that can only be actually attributed to free education and of course its effect on women's education. Now, I have actually here, it's a little more complicated, the graph. But what I have here is a total undergraduate enrollment in the university system by year, gender and major fields. So all the fields, right? Starting with arts and management and science and engineering, architecture, medical and dental, law, agriculture, vet, paramedical, infotech, indigenous medicine, except for engineering, where of course the numbers have been historically low, although it is also going up. You can see every year the numbers have been rising for all the fields. And of course, if you compare this with men, actually in some fields now, women are like law and arts, it's 80 to 85% female. Imagine the profession of law heavily dominated by women. That is the situation in Sri Lanka. So now, of course, having talked about the positive side, all of the gains due to education, making education free, universal free education, I want to now ask the question, but is education for women the last frontier? Or is it just a significant milepost? How do we treat education and the status of women in Sri Lanka? A sector-based analysis of female literacy rates reveals that the gains are unequal for women of different socio-economic groups. Now in Sri Lanka, of course, the Ceylon tea, I'm sure everybody knows about, and of course it's produced in tea estates. And there is a special group that works actually, and that group is social and ethnic. And the literacy rates among this group for women remains very low, has